Not bad at all. Polish last names aren't easy.
Yes, that's true.
So I'll just share my screen and get started. Perfect. Okay. Well, hello, everyone, and thank you for this opportunity. I'm thrilled to be talking to you at your first meeting of 2021. Jen and I will be with you for about the next hour and going through just a few updates of what the EcoPark system has been up to over the last little while. But before we jump into that, I'll begin with just an overview of how folks have been protecting natural areas in our neck of the woods. I feel like to really understand the EcoPark system, we do have to acknowledge the historical conservation efforts of our unique little corner of Lake Ontario. Jen then will jump in and provide some on-the-ground examples of the impacts of this alliance from the perspective of the Naturalist Club. I don't want to spoil anything, but goats may be involved. And then the last half of this talk, I'll spend time focusing on a really, really exciting project that we worked on last year on wildlife corridor mapping. It was funded by the Greenbelt Foundation, and it's really setting some interesting questions and next steps for the EcoPark system moving forward for 2021 and beyond. The researchers, a firm called Apex RMS, who have done awesome work on urban and near-urban landscapes across Canada and internationally, I think, were a part of this project, and they're actually finishing the final report right now. So you're getting a bit of a sneak peek. Okay, so Hamilton Harbour and its watershed, which includes Cootes Paradise, and creeps up to the Niagara Escarpment between and around Hamilton and Burlington, is a fairly complex area. It's got highways, universities, private businesses, private landowners, disjointed trails, cemeteries, a lot of endangered species, plants, bridges, the second oldest hot dog stand in Canada, and a whole lot of stuff going on. And there's been a long history of working together and collaborating to protect these areas that go back to the 1800s and way back before then too. But I just wanted to highlight some of the more recent parts. Like in the 1880s, Cootes Marsh was designated as a fish sanctuary. In the 1920s, it became a wildlife reserve. Throughout the 19-teens and the 20s, a lot of folks, groups, individuals started coming together to talk about the marsh and its wider area. It actually includes a lot of effort from the Hamilton Bird Protection Sanctuary, which became the Hamilton Naturalist Club. So shout out to you folks. In 1927, the South Shore was purchased, and it continued these conversations about what should happen to this land. This actually led to the formation of RBG, and the gardens were incorporated in 1941, along with the protection of the North Shore of the marsh by the province. Again, adding another actor to this area. A bunch of other lands were also added to RBG throughout the years, including the Lower Grindstone Creek Ravine, which was brought on off the Henry Valley Farm in the 1920s, Rock Chapel, Boris Falls, etc. The 40s and 50s were really interesting. This brought on conservation authorities. This expanded protected areas in this region, especially around the escarpment. Now, these properties were also separated by roads and other land use types. As we all know, development is an ongoing thing that happens in this area. And it became a part of this fragmented landscape. Our little pocket of Lake Ontario really became this fragmented, disjointed patchwork of green protected natural areas mixed in with a lot of other uses by the 70s. Now, around this time, there were also a lot of provincial efforts to acknowledge the importance of these sensitive lands within and around the marsh. In 1978, the Parkway Belt West Plan, which connects Halton, York, Peel, Hamilton, and Toronto, identified the area, which is now the EcoPark system, as a strong link between the Escarpment and Lake Ontario watersheds. Like I sort of mentioned before, development has always been a thing that's been happening here. And by the 90s, there was a growing interest in developing this area. Land developers wanted to build subdivisions in Pleasant View, an area in Dundas, just north of the marsh. This came to a head in 1994 when the Ontario Municipal Board ruled that developers could build in this area, but they required large estate lots. This really effectively slowed down development, almost to a halt. Interestingly, and I think which is super relevant to us here, one of the major reasons for this decision was that expert opinion, and there was lots of it, suggested that this is the last ecological corridor between the Niagara Escarpment and the Great Lakes coastal wetlands that isn't sliced up by urban development or a 400 series highway. That's a pretty tremendous thing to think about and let sink in. If you imagine Lake Ontario and its sort of neighboring lands, this little nugget is the only one that connects up to the escarpment without a highway or some sort of infrastructure in it. It's a fun shout out to Dundas, our quiet little town, became an important open landscape, and it was determined that developing that particular Pleasant View area would significantly change the landscape. The 70s and early 80s also brought on the start of the Hamilton Harbour Remedial Action Plan, or RAP. In 1987, both Canada and the US came together and decided that it's best to work together to remediate the damages across the Great Lakes Basin and its areas of concern through locally led remedial action plans. Our local efforts engaged government, community, industry, and other partners and stakeholders to restore the harbor's naturally environmental health. Basically, again, saying that, in order to remediate and protect this watershed, we can do it better together. Fast forward to 2006, and 5 remedial action plan agencies got together to think about the broader landscape, how to take care of the surrounding lands in and around the harbor, to form something around the idea that we've got to help and address this growing fragmentation of our remaining natural areas. Steering committee was struck, and discussions around a park, an eco-park, between Cootes Paradise and Escarpment began. Really, this whole chat was, I'm oversimplifying it, so apologies, but a big chunk of it was really about how to retain biological diversity. At this time, RBG also did a series of studies that started to suggest that its properties were one of the most biodiverse hotspots across Canada. Nearly 1/5 of plant and animal life was in their natural areas. So again, this idea of wanting to restore areas, restoring areas, even degraded land, became a part of this conversation around remediating the harbor, essentially talking about ecological corridors. In 2010, the committee was able to put together and propose a strategic plan. And by 2013, 9 members, including the Bruce Trail Conservancy, Conservation Halton Region, the City of Burlington, Hamilton Conservation Authority, you folks with the Hamilton Naturalist Club, McMaster University, RBG, who did I miss? I think that's everyone. Formally signed an MOU, bringing the alliance to fruition. Since then, we've been working on a few key priorities, things like securing funding for land securement, enhancing wildlife corridors, looking at sustainable recreational use, trails and transportation specifically, education, outreach with private landowners, our neighbors, a lot of stuff since 2013. And at this stage, I'll throw it to Jen, who'll give a few minutes of sort of on-the-ground efforts that we've been able to help out collaboratively through the eyes of the Hamilton Naturalist Club. So Jen, the floor is yours, and let me know when you want me to go ahead with the presentation.
Okay, thanks, Dom. And hi, everybody. So I guess HNC, we've been partnering on various activities for over 100 years. That's just one of our strengths. You know, we make partnerships happen, we help to found new things, and generally we're pretty successful at helping out. And we also have a long and strong interest in, you know, the whole Cootes area and making sure that it stays protected from, you know, that was something that we worked on from when we were first founded. So it was just a natural fit that, of course, we wanted to be part of this new park, which is now the Cootes to Escarpment EcoPark System. And I think it's fair to say that we're proud to be a partner of it and a founding partner. And then next, yeah. So I guess I'm here to show how this partnership really is making things happen on the ground. You know, there's a lot happening behind the scenes, but we're seeing a lot of action on the ground too. And for those of you who know me, that you know that that's kind of what I like to focus on doing. So I kind of wanted to talk about a few things that have happened because of C2E, particularly around land protection and stewardship. So on this map, I've highlighted 3 areas, and these are areas that are protected because of HNC. So we own or manage them. But they came about because of the Cootes to Escarpment EcoPark System. So we have Cartwright in the Pleasant View area. That was before Cootes to Escarpment, but initial discussions were already happening, and that demonstrates our partnership because we went in as equal partners with Conservation Halton on that. Also in that area are the rest of the Pleasant View lands, which in 2015, I believe, we were able to get protected. So Tom mentioned the OMB hearing that lots of us were involved with, and that you know, the club played a role in. And these were lands that were contentious for many, many years. And finally, the time was right for us to be able to acquire it. The only reason that we were able, and we means the partnership, were able to acquire it was because partners were willing to take the lands, and we were able to get funding because it was part of this bigger system. It was this big collective. It wasn't just one partner going out to buy one piece of land. So that attracted significant dollars to, you know, and you can see how these areas are really helping to fill in the hole in the donut. And then kind of further east, we have the Anita Buchan-Duca Nature Sanctuary. Sorry guys, I got that messed up. So the Dutka Nature Sanctuary, which is what we generally refer to it as. So this was a property that we were able to acquire. Again, Conservation Halton did a lot of the legwork on this in negotiating and talking with the landowners. And then it wasn't a right time for them to acquire the land, but we were able to do it. So then another partnership. And then there was a fun property that Conservation Halton acquired, and it was a partner at the table who discovered the property was for sale through Kijiji. And the club actually contributed significant dollars with the Bruce Trail Conservancy to Conservation Halton to be able to acquire the property. And that property is just north of Dundooly. And then the next slide. And then there's our Dundooly Nature Sanctuary. So this is our newest nature sanctuary. And I think this was able to come about because of Cootes to Escarpment. It was one of the properties that we collectively had identified as a priority, because for those of you who have been there, you know it protects a really steep ravine that helps to connect Conservation Halton lands down, almost right down to RBG lands. It also helps to protect the water that stretches in between them. And so, you know, this is a Naturalist Club owned property, thanks to the funding support from Sheila Dundooly. But the whole thing came about because of C2E, and now we have this We haven't been able to update the mapping, but we have this new dark green corridor on the map. So that's how some funding and some land securement has been able to happen through C2E. And then, we have to take care of the lands because now we're responsible for taking care of them forever. So then the next slide, we get into the stewardship. So pros from stewardship, we get everything from tips to tools, like helping to manage invasives. We have a stewardship subcommittee that regularly talks about what's happening in the area, sharing tips, sharing, sometimes sharing volunteers, sharing resources in terms of tools and things like that. So we have found this, we're able to contribute because we do a lot of invasives work ourselves, but it's also super handy. Like there's a stand of Phragmites at the Dundully Nature Sanctuary. And for us, we've been fortunate. This is a fairly new invasive, new to us, like new to HNC properties, but it's not new to the other partners in C2E. So we're able to use that expertise to help figure out what are we going to do with this thing before it takes off and covers the whole corridor. And then the next slide. It's also helpful because we're all collaborating on how we're going to bring goats. So Tom was right, goats are coming to Dundully next summer. So we, through Cootes to Escarpment, one of the members actually happens to have goats, and we have been talking about getting the goats on an HNC property for years. Now we have the property. So we are going to block off areas for the goats to do their magic and chomp up a bunch of buckthorn. We're going to research through it as well to see basically who's more effective, the goats or Jen, in managing invasives. But it's also a huge education opportunity because it'll be a fun COVID-safe outdoor activity that people can come and hang out with the goats and find out what are the goats are doing and why and things like that. So stay tuned for more details about that, because we hope that everybody will want to come out and, with COVID safe precautions and everything, but we hope that everybody will be able to come out and visit the goats and see the property. And so all of this and all of us regularly working together through different initiatives through C2E also then helps with our education work. So, we get speakers for events, also things like when we could have events in person, even things like where are good spots to have events. Speakers come to workshops and things like that. So I guess basically there's a few little examples that shows just how powerful Cootes to Escarpment is, what it's able to make happen on the ground for HNC. So we hope that we're contributing, but we're definitely benefiting from being part of this partnership. And we're thrilled and proud to be a partner of something that's this big, as well as to get some benefits and have new properties that get goats to come. So I'm going to pass it back to Tom, who's going to share some really exciting research that has been happening in C2E. Tom, it's all yours.
Thank you. Looking at the goats for half a second more before we say bye. Yeah, and thank you, Jen. Yeah, you guys are awesome partners of the EcoPark system. We're happy to have you on board. There we go. Bye-bye, goats. Okay. So as an alliance, we've always wanted to do more. One key piece was something that's come up in multiple conversations, this idea that to have a more detailed look at ecological corridors so that our partner agencies can have more tools to look at their landscape than before. Now, fortunately, there's a growing kind of movement and series of discussions provincially and nationally and internationally around the idea of near urban and peri-urban areas. These are natural areas within and around urban cores, and the many, many ways they can be protected, restored, enhanced, and how much they benefit folks living around them. For a long time in the conservation circle, when you're discussing protecting land, it was always or often around the idea of huge, huge swaths of land. But now there's this increasing attention to a near-urban, peri-urban landscape, aka the bread and butter of the EcoPark system, and more broadly, what Hamilton and Burlington's natural areas are about. In Ontario, the Greenbelt Foundation is taking a lead in these discussions. Last year, they started a group called the Southern Ontario Nature Coalition, an alliance we're a part of. We are looking at the benefits, gaps, the importance, just an overall picture of what's happening in these kind of landscapes in and around Southern Ontario, and what can be done more, and pitching it to the federal government in March of this year, actually. Now, there's been research in this kind of realm over the last few years as well. Academically, there's a growing body of papers and things like that help push this idea that natural areas in and around urban areas are good. One key one I wanted to highlight to get our corridor mapping study chat going is a study by two researchers, Bowman and Cortez, that happened in 2015. They did a similar mapping exercise across the whole Great Lakes Basin, across Lake Ontario, across the whole province, actually. And they had some interesting results that was mapped at 1 hectare at a time, roughly 100 by 100 pixels. Now, the EcoPark system, it's roughly 30 square kilometers, something along the lines of 3,000 pixels. So this study didn't really provide a detailed enough picture for us. So our goal since that project came out was to do something similar, but at a much greater resolution. And I'm happy to report that last year's corridor mapping project that Apex RMX led got us down to a 15 by 15 meter pixel resolution. I don't know how we did this math, don't ask me, but essentially it's 44 times more worth of information. We have 44 times more detailed info for our partners to digest than we had before, which is really, really exciting for us. It's exciting because it's a fresh look at our study area. It's a snatch. Oh, I see a few raised hands. I'll answer questions via the Q&A. So if you have any questions, please just type them into the Q&A and I'll get to them after the presentation. Thanks. So fresh new look at our whole area, a snapshot of the current state of wildlife connectivity based on 9 months worth of mapping and expert feedback that Apex RMX was able to help us through. The process was sort of on 3 steps. The first was developing a land use cover map. This was the base of the whole study, a detailed observation of what's actually in this area, all to kind of help us eventually identify priority areas for connectivity, which was our outcome. We got there through 2 types of analyses. One is a generalized connectivity analysis that predict movement probability on a broad scale, looking at specific land covering types and how permeable they are. And then we focused on 3 focal species to do a more focused analysis that complemented this general study, to kind of help us identify specific patches that species could use. This combined to provide an overall picture for us to digest. I do want to highlight that we also chose to have a 20-kilometer buffer beyond the study area of the EcoPark System partner lands to get a better picture of how we connect to the larger landscape. Now, there's going to be a ton of maps that we'll be going through, but I do want to take the time to really, really emphasize that the EcoPark system is really about the people around the table. Yes, we're looking at a lot of maps and looking at the physical natural areas and how they're expressed on those maps. But like Jen mentioned, it's those committees, it's the volunteer events, it's connecting with our neighbors, it's making sure our partners have opportunities to talk to each other. That really is the essence of the EcoPark system. It's that whole idea of we can work better together. So I know we're looking at maps, but I just wanted to emphasize that. Okay, so step one, land cover and land use. A lot of research went into this. Coincidentally, and interestingly, a lot of it was publicly open available data through Solaris, which was interesting, with feedback from our partner agencies. Not too many surprises here, but you can kind of see, there's a lot of deciduous forest, about 30%, tilled areas, spoilers, at 18%, and build up impervious areas. So this painted a picture of what we're looking at. We also looked at culverts and bridges. Those proved to be really important, and there was a lot of feedback from both conservation authorities and the cities to determine where they were and how permeable they were to wildlife. Okay, so the first study, that generic study, this is where things get a little tricky. The approach by the researchers was to kind of treat this land use map as a circuit board. So if you imagine them running electricity through a circuit board, that's how they help determine which of the land areas were most permeable. Again, there's a ton of math behind that. Can't explain that, but here's a rough idea of how species, in theory, could move through and around the EcoPark system, expressed through sort of a circuit board analogy. And again, the lighter the area, the higher the probability of movement. The lower, the darker is less likely. Now, if you connect this to the study area map, there's some really interesting signatures that are showing up. We clearly see the escarpment up along here as somewhere where probably there's a lot of high movement for species. Cootes Paradise, north and south shore, it's proven to be a really important piece as well. It's a bright light color all around it. There's also interesting things happening in and around North Aldershot. If we scale back and look at the whole research, which includes that 20-kilometer buffer, there were two really interesting insights. Essentially, there are only two corridors that connect outside of the EcoPark system study area. Northwest in North Aldershot is one. So you can kind of see Kerncliffe Park, Waterdown, moving up to North Burlington and up to Milton. Interestingly, it does lead down to the Grindstone and connects throughout the rest of Aldershot as well. And the southwest, around Cootes Paradise. Straight through McMaster, straight through Dundas, into the Dundas Valley, an area that connects outside of the EcoPark system. So these are really interesting insights suggesting that the EcoPark system is a bit of a hub in this region for wildlife corridors, and there's only two ways in and out of it. Now, before I hop into specific species, I wanted to reinforce that idea of, this study really allowed us for a more nuanced approach that we weren't able to do before. So here is the Cortez and Bowman study from 2015. It's really cool looking, but that little red dot is the EcoPark system. The top left rectangle is us zoomed in, so it's a little blurry, definitely pixelated. This bottom left is the result of the Apex study that was worked on last year. Much more detailed. You can see, again, a bit of the nuance. You can see some of the dark spots especially too. And you can clearly see where the corridors are extending out of the EcoPark System study area. So, how are animals using the EcoPark system and what patches work for them? The second part of this study was a focal species connectivity analysis. We looked at identifying, as much as we could, species that were most relevant to the EcoPark system and the region. So we looked at the different ecologies in the area, taxonomy, food preferences, habitat preferences, to get as a broad picture as we could, and we landed on 3. North-tailed shrew, common small mammal. It's a short dispersal and loves old forest. Blandings turtle, that's our wetland and aquatic lover example. Loves forest as well, has a moderate dispersal, but can move about a kilometer or more, and it is endangered. And the deer, it's our common large mammal, basically loves everything in the area. So this map, or these 3 maps, kind of highlighted what their suitability is based on our land use cover and research that the Apex RMS team did. They also ran that same circuit board approach. I find this slide really, really interesting. It does show that the deer, again, the light is the low dispersal resistance, so this is where the deer can move. And then the darker it gets, the higher resistance it is. So deer is pretty mobile, loves everything. The turtle is really interesting. It begins to highlight how impervious the urban areas are. Same with the shrew. So the darker areas are, when looking at our land use map, that's that urban core. Those are private landowners there and built up land in the area. So these kind of are starting to help us identify patches and where we want to maintain connections. Specifically around forest, it seemed like deciduous forest was the one that really started popping with these species. So what does this all mean? Here is a sort of combined map of the important patches. High are the red, light or dark blue is the low. It's a little hard to see, but the dark gray are EcoPark System partner lands. The research started to highlight some interesting opportunities and potential hotspots for us. Waterdown being one of them. Cootes Paradise North, Forest Falls area as well. The lower grindstone in Aldershot, huge opportunity there. And pretty much all of North Aldershot. So these patches are proving to be really, really important. They are mostly forest and they provide critical connectivity for all the focal species. I mentioned earlier, we are connected to the broader landscape, but there are a few key movement corridors that highlighted this, or this research highlighted. One being that North Aldershot piece, and then the spot on the south shore of Cootes Paradise moving into Dundas. This is all kind of suggesting that habitat suitability and connectivity should be looked at together when we look at highlighting priority areas for the future. So this study for the EcoPark system is proven to be a really, really great foundation to build on. It's a hypothesis testing piece for us. For all the scientists out there, this is a first step. There wasn't any wildlife tracking done for this. It is all GIS process based that provides some great information for 3 focal species, and there are now questions that we can then test moving forward. We're really excited about this because it feeds into our 2021 to 2030 strategic plan. We're looking at the next decade and where we want to go. Some of our priorities include, we want to keep making this ecosystem healthy. So this research really, really helps us pinpoint some of the hotspot areas. It does highlight that we are a hub in the region. There's a lot of traffic here going in and out of the EcoPark system, and it does connect to areas around it. human experience is a big piece too. What does this mean for trail development for the future? Is this an education opportunity? How do we share this knowledge in an effective way? How do we get people excited about where they live, work, and play? Is a huge thing for us. We've been talking about our partner agencies and providing tools for them, but we have wonderful neighbors in the EcoPark system, private landowners and businesses who live, work, and play within these areas and around them. So that's really, really important for us too. We want to be innovative, and we want to be sort of on the cutting edge of research. This was, again, a first step. We also have McMaster University as a partner. Their lands are really, really interesting and are a connecting dot in the broader landscape as well. But not only that, McMaster University and Niagara College, Mohawk College, and all the other institutions across Southern Ontario, we've got the potential to be a research hub for this stuff and work around peri-urban areas. That's got us really, really excited too. We also want to use this research as a tool to help our existing partnerships. How can our partner agencies use these results to help them with management plans or land securement, and all the other work that we do is a big consideration for us as well. So long story short, we're really, really excited about this. It's that first step on a longer journey for us. It doesn't happen without all the work around the table. That's kind of the message I was really, really hoping to get across. This area has had a lot of collaborative efforts of folks working together to try and protect these really, really important natural areas. And the EcoPark system plays a small part in that conversation, and we're happy to facilitate more discussions around it and hopefully keep protecting these areas. So that's all I've got. I'm going to open up the chat and see if there are any questions, and I'll do my best to answer them. Oh, and there's my email. If anyone has any additional questions, feel free to reach out. Happy to answer any follow-up. Okay, so Marika is asking how the data for the probability of movement was acquired. So it was a combination of literature reviews. We used iNaturalist data as well to help define the species. And then we worked with our partners. So conservation authorities and the cities also do have data, including RBG2. So it was a combination of those three, sort of lit review, looking at publicly accessible things like iNaturalist, and reviewing data that our partners have collected. And I'll note, it was a 9-month project, so we could only focus on those 3 species. We're by no way saying that it's definitive, and it is sort of, it's a hypothesis testing thing. So it is that first step on a longer journey, and there's a lot more questions coming out of this study than answers, which is really, really exciting for us, because that opens up the door for a lot of research.
Hey, Tom, there are a couple of questions in the chat as well, if you want to have a look at those.
Okay. Let's give me a second to get to the chat. Oh, there we go. Mark Senior zonation, what cost did you associate with each of the land uses? I'm not sure what you mean by that question. It's from N. Do you mind giving it another shot? And then we've got a follow-up comment saying, Deer are a species that increase in abundance with disturbance, similar to coyotes. May be problematic in terms of objectives of the study. Amphibious could be used as another group or another animal. Yes, for sure. Again, more questions and answers about this, and we are eager and looking forward to looking at other types of species. All right, Zoe Green, strong correlation between areas used by wildlife and protected areas by conservation authorities. Land remains available and viable for wildlife. Recent provincial government changes. And issue permits. So that's a really, really great question. I think I would look at it as what can folks do in their backyard? You know, these maps do go beyond partner areas though. And it's that connective link that is really key to look at as a landowner who lives in and around this area. So looking at ways of, you know, again, what can you do in your backyard? Pollinator gardens, planting other native species, things like that. Gord, Southern Ontario Nature Coalition. I believe there's 8 of us. There's organizations like Land Trusts, Ontario Nature. I mentioned the Greenbelt Foundation, Carolinian Canada. A lot of folks around the table who have done significant work in not only protecting their own areas, but talking with and connecting with landowners and just private citizens in our region. Again, it's a really, really, really fascinating group who is essentially making the case that, you know, there are unique considerations to take on when you're looking at protecting landscapes in and around urban areas. There's a lot of things like landowners and farm owners especially doing really, really interesting voluntary work on their properties to ensure they help and become connective links for wildlife. So just trying to capture all that as a group and help us move forward. Interestingly, the EcoPark system is looked at as a model in this group. The way we've been able to work with our 9 partner agencies who are very diverse. We've got a university, we've got municipalities, we've got conservation authorities, we've got the Hamilton Naturalist Club. So there's a lot of eyes on us and how we work together. You know, our approach is very consensus-based. If one partner isn't comfortable with something, we just don't do it. It's also entirely voluntary. So it's reassuring, exciting, and we're incredibly thankful that folks have stuck around, you know, since the early 2000s. So it's nice to see that groups like SONC are noticing that too. All right, John Sherman. Land above the escarpment's edge along C2E's north boundaries is developing. Can anyone on the panel speak to C2E's coalition hopes for approach towards roping in lands above the edge? Good question. Generally, land securement, as most folks know, is really, really, really expensive in this area. You know, without sort of private donors who have a ton of cash available, or strong fundraising campaigns, it is really difficult. One approach with developments is more of like the long-term game, making sure that they are looking at sort of appropriate ways of building properties, and then it's the private landowner engagement too, making sure folks are aware of different things they can do in their backyards. Maybe they're aware that you know, they live in and around a wildlife corridor. So it's a combination of outreach, education, engaging developers too, and where possible, we do secure properties. We do have a land securement strategy, but again, land's pretty pricey here. All right. Just going down the list, Glenn, hawthorn and buckthorn discourage the shrikes from staying. Not sure. That might be a Jen question, actually.
Okay. Hi, Glenn. So we're not removing hawthorn. We want as much hawthorn as possible. So I think, I don't know that shrike really use buckthorn anyway. So we're getting rid of all the buckthorn and freeing up hawthorn. So hopefully that will just help help the shrike. And I don't know how many shrike. There might be somebody else on the call or whatever who might be able to help answer about how many shrike might be in. Or maybe we can get back to you about that, Glenn.
Great. Thanks, Jen. And Marika, you're right on with your comments about using GIS land cover with plant species, correlating with probability found in literature. If you want to follow up with me via email, I can send a more detailed outline of the research and the back-end work that went into developing these maps. I sort of did a highlight reel in this presentation. There's many more maps where this came from, so I'd be happy to share those. And again, for everyone, so the final report will be done at the end of this month. So we are looking forward to next steps and sharing some of these findings in different ways. And it looks like I missed one from Zoe. It's not updated. Of course. No plans, but that is a great potential research question. So for folks around the table, Zoe noted that Solris is not updated that regularly, and user data as well. It's a bit coarse to capture details of the unique wildlife in this area, if you use those two. So do we as the EcoPark system have plans to acquire alternate sources of data to keep up with the rapid land changes and impact on pressures of local systems like waterfall and the use of tourists? I think those are fantastic questions, and definitely worth looking at as far as our priorities for the next little while. I'd also, Zoe, if you're interested, and sorry if it's Zoe, not Zoe, but if you're interested in looking at the impacts of tourists or just general research on trail usage, the Hamilton-Burlington Trails Council and the Ontario's Trails Council has been doing a lot of interesting work around what's happening on trails, especially around last year, given what COVID brought on and the increased use of local trails. So it'll be worthwhile to check into that body of research if you're interested. Brock University actually has been doing a lot of research in that field too. And again, if you'd like, feel free to reach out to me and I can connect some dots for you.
And Tom, I don't know if you've seen it, but there are a couple more comments, questions that have come in on chat.
Great. So I'm just going to go to the last slide with my email. There we go. So again, that's my email. Look at the chat. Alice asks if we have plans to expand the movement probability mapping to a seasonal scale for more targeted land management. Again, I think that's a really, really fantastic idea. You got it right on the nose. I mean, this is a very moment in time piece that we did. It would be really, really great to fine tune it and look at it seasonally. I did forget to mention, you know, the EcoPark system does have management plans that it's been working on in collaboration with its partners to really, really help them understand sort of the issues, opportunities, and the things that are going on in and around the EcoPark system. I think that's a really, really fantastic follow-up question for further research. Sorry, to answer your question, no plans yet, but I think I'm going to steal that question and bring it forward to the management committee. Thanks. Claire, Centennial Bikeway pathway has been studied or thought of as a potential greenway. Claire, I encourage you to look at the Hamilton Burlington Trails Council. They're doing a lot of work around potential greenway loops within the city of Hamilton and Burlington. I'm not sure if Centennial Bikeway and pathways were incorporated into their planning, but they do have an awesome overall vision of how to try and connect some of the disjointed trails across the city, both through its urban core and around it. A lot of that feeds into the EcoPark system as well. Jen, we have a question from Marika about common mullein.
Yeah, I'm actually, I thought it was invasive too, but I'm not positive. And I guess one thing about the RBG plant sale, it's not a strictly native plant sale. Usually it's often kind of just plants that people might be interested in and whatever the growers want to bring. So it might not all be strictly native species. So so just share that. And common mullein, that's one I'm not positive about. Sorry.
It's not native.
Okay, thanks, Chris.
I'll add that in 2019, because we won't count 2020, everything was on hold. The EcoPark System hosted a Cootes to Escarpment Fall Festival in September at the EcoPark System, and a part of that was a native plant sale. We had some really, really positive feedback from it, and our intention was to host a similar festival last year, but obviously things happened, so we weren't able to. We are hoping to do a similar event this year in the fall. An overarching message is that you can go outside in the fall. It's not scary. It's a little colder, but that's not bad. And there's plenty of unique biodiversity in that season that you can check out. A huge chunk of that is letting citizens and folks who attend that fall festival know that they can also have an impact in their backyard. So planting native species, which can be planted in the fall. That was one of the big takeaways from our 2019 event. A lot of folks showed up for the events like nature walks, and were really surprised that you could plant things that just didn't plant in the spring. So I think there's more work to do in outreach and letting folks know that native plants exist. Here's a list of what they are, and also you can plant them almost all year round. So keep your eyes peeled for our 2020 fall event as well. We'll do a little plug for that too. Thanks for sending that CVC link, Marika.
Okay, looks like that's